My guest today is Paul Strohm. He's formerly the J.R.R. Tolkien Professor of Medieval Language and Literature at Oxford. He also taught at Columbia University and Indiana University. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure.
Paul, one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest is to talk about two new projects you have in the works. First is a book called A Day in the Life of Chaucer, which will be published by Viking Penguin, coming out in a little over a year. And also a book that's just come out this month called Sportin' Jack, 100 100-word stories. And I have the link to it on my website. Now, both of these projects are biographical in a sense, and I wonder if we might start with Sportin' Jack. Tell us about this book, how it came about, what led you to put it together in the way that you did.
Well, these are autobiographical stories, and I decided, I was writing a longer autobiography, actually, but I didn't like the connections. I didn't like the, okay, in 1962, Paul Strohm matriculated at University of California, and that kind of, and I found I was wanting to be anecdotal and discontinuous. I was wanting to go to the stuff I knew about and stuff I wanted to say, and I didn't want a lot of fill and moving me from one place to another place. And so I started writing these shorter pieces. And then I decided to limit them to 100 words each, just arbitrarily. At some point I was sitting there at my computer and I just said, why not 100 words? This might partially be a function of the word count on the computer. It's very easy to tell when you've written 100 words. And, but I liked having a limit. I liked having the kind of limit that inspires some kind of ingenuity within it, that forces the writer to make decisions about what needs to be in and what can be out. And I found I like working within the 100-word limitation a lot. And in fact, I find a number of my utterances in and out of this book are now coming out to be about 100 words, although I realize this one isn't. And so anyway, I had these 100-word stories, and I sort of shopped them around a little. In fact, I published some of them on the internet in various internet journals and this sort of thing. But I'm old-fashioned enough that when something comes out on the internet and is distributed electronically, I just kind of think, well, where did it go and what happened to it? And I don't really feel like I published anything. So I wanted something a little solid and something a little more in my grasp. And I decided to bring it out as a volume. And actually, my son is an entertainment lawyer and an intellectual property lawyer who works with rock groups. And his specialty is releasing rock records without labels. And so actually, he's the guru of Bon Iver's release. And who else does he have? The Civil Wars and Alabama Shakes. And so from his perspective, he just said, well, look, you know, why are you fooling around with publishers at all? Why don't you self-publish? And I decided to self-publish, and I've been very pleased with the process.
One of the questions I was going to ask is about that form, because one of the websites I saw it on was Tumblr, I think, first, and which lends itself to that short-form publication. And what was it that made you think about presenting it in fragments of roughly the same size?
Well, actually, because they are all 100 words each, so it's, there they are, and so they're going to be fragments. And actually, it was my son's idea to start posting up on Tumblr. He's taking care of the publicity for this. And so he's been putting up the Tumblr pieces, and a couple of online journals are going to run short pieces on it. It was just published last week. Right. And so I didn't even know Tumblr existed. But I think Tumblr is kind of a classy outfit. In fact, I'm having a very steep learning curve here. And CreateSpace, who published the book, has been terrific. And they got it in my hands in a hurry, and they let me make more decisions than academic publishers have ever let me make.
Paul, can I get you to read one of these for me?
Sure, of course. In fact, I'm quite eager to read one or more to anyone who wants to listen. I just got my haircut yesterday, so I'm thinking about haircuts, and this one's called On the Run. It has to do with me and the issue of the haircut. Everybody wants to change haircutters and can't figure out how. My barber Harry and I used to go mushroom hunting together. He invited me to join his lodge, the Order of Red Men. We exchanged Christmas gifts, but he gave terrible haircuts. Mary Ellen put her foot down. She was losing libido over my crummy hair. On a research trip to England, I sent Harry a postcard with lots of stamps on it, saying I had moved there and wasn't coming back. I even faked a return address. back in Bloomington, I lived like a fugitive, trapped in my lie.
If you lie to your hairdresser, who won't you lie to? So that's Sportin' Jack, and that's now available on Amazon. I just saw it this morning.
Yeah, it's going to be on Kindle in about a week.
Okay, great, great. So in your next book is A Day in the Life of Chaucer, and this will be coming out from Viking Penguin in a little over a year. And I guess let's start by asking, which day is it? Which day did you choose to focus on, and why?
It's October 1st, 1386, and it's the opening of Parliament. And it's a terrible day in his life because he's just gotten booted out of his apartment over Aldgate. He's within a month of needing to resign his position of Collector of Customs. He's soon to leave London altogether and move to Kent. It's a disastrous Parliament for him because he's a member of the King's Party, and the King's Party just gets thrashed and beaten up in this Parliament. And it's already evident on day one that that's going to happen. So this is day one when he leaves his longtime London apartment, moves down to Westminster for Parliament, knowing he's never going to go back to his apartment. He's going to have to start a new life. And I thought it would be a good moment on which to focus, because there are a lot of things in the moment, and there are also a lot of things running through the moment. So in being very synchronous here and seizing a single moment, I don't want to relinquish the opportunity to talk about some things that are in process as we move through that moment. And I think almost everything in his life is in process at that moment. For instance, my marriage chapter, I just say on October 1st, 1386, Chaucer woke up alone. His wife is up in Lincolnshire. And I go on to explain why it is his wife is up in Lincolnshire and why they're not living together, because I'm most certain that they didn't. And so I take a number of different slices out of this day and, in a sense, expand upon them in order to illuminate their significance.
Now, your work, I've always found your writing really accessible, the academic writing that you've done. In this case, you're actually, though, writing for popular press, Viking Penguin. And
yes, and I don't know quite. Well, my book on conscience was for a sort of an educated but non-specialist readership. This is in the Oxford University Press very short editions series. And it gave me the confidence that I could do that kind of writing. And I suspect my principal publisher with Viking has a lot of ideas about this kind of project and the kind of audience I'm writing for. And I suspect after she's looked at it, she'll have some good advice, and I'll do some rewriting. But anyway, I am feeling my way toward this audience. There are different ways in which you need to be interesting for the two audiences. I want to be interesting for either audience. When I'm writing academic, I want to be interesting to an academic. I think writing for a general audience doesn't mean you have to be a dummy or misinformed or try to put a lot of fake-o generalizations on them. But I think nevertheless, you need to sort of rethink the question of what it is they're going to want to know, how much proof they're going to need. For one thing, I'm writing this book without footnotes. My little conscience book, without footnotes. And at the end of each chapter, I just had a for further reading section. And I think in this case, this is very liberating for me, and it's going to be a welcome relief to the reader to not have to have a footnote at the end of every second or third sentence. But at the end of the chapter, if they want to know more, I tell them where to go.
Are there misconceptions about Chaucer that this book is addressing? Are there ways that doing this narrow slice of life addresses some of the larger conceptions of Chaucer that we know?
Well, I think it lets me go deep. And I'm amazed at how much stuff I've learned that isn't commonly held among Chaucerians. I mean, I've noticed, by the way, Bruce and I have this Chaucer meeting we go to every 2 years, or usually go to every 2 years, called the New Chaucer Society. And they have, at this point, their program has swollen and swollen. At this point, they'll have about 400 papers on a program. I look back at the last couple of programs, there has not been a single session or a single paper that I noticed that has anything to do with Chaucer's biography, life, social milieu, associations, companionship, political pressures on Chaucer, just nothing. Nobody is talking about that. So they're finding 500 things to say about Chaucer every 2 years, not concerning themselves with biography, which I think is a very rich area and a very untouched area. And the biographers have written literary biographies, and what that's meant is that they haven't gone as deep into the historical research as they might have. And when you go into the historical research, there's stuff sitting there. For instance, there's a project on history of Parliament now, where it's really possible to see who was in Parliament in 1386 and what their politics were and what the political alignments were in that Parliament that Chaucer was a member of. And different previous Chaucer biographers have perhaps written a sentence on that, but I think it's a subject of considerable interest, and I go into it in some depth. Chaucer was involved in various scams in customs with Nicholas Brimber, and I think I've got some of those scams figured out. Brimber was loaning the king money, and the king was giving him the right to repay himself out of the proceeds of customs, and the only person overseeing the repayment process was Chaucer. And I think I'm able to show some of why it was so important for them to put Chaucer in that position and what kinds of things I think he probably did in that position. I myself am amazed that some of these things haven't been written about.
So one of the implicit arguments of the book then is that biography is still an important part of thinking about an authorial legacy.
Well, I think biography is, and just the historical record. And I know there's a current tendency now in literary studies to sort of free oneself from the text's relations with the social surrounding and with social determinations. And in fact, there's been a kind of zestful withdrawal from the rather longish period we were in which something called New Historicism was a major methodology. And surrounding history was regarded as important to the comprehension of the text. And it was regarded as a two-way street between the text and surrounding history. A lot of the tendencies in English literary criticism right now are to go all the way back to formalism and with the kind of rigor even the formalists did, and talk about the text as an autonomous object without any relations to the surrounding society. So in a sense, I'm swimming way against the current here, because I'm trying to not only do what new historicists used to do, I'm trying to make some even larger claims than that for the historical record.
Great. Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Gladly.
And we'll look forward to both of these books. Thanks so much.
Thank you.